The key scraped against the lock, a dry, protesting rasp against the aged metal. Room 404, alpha negative 773, gamma negative 2. The designation felt clinical, impersonal, a fitting prelude to the hollow space I expected to find. Disappointment clings to a man like damp wool, and mine was particularly heavy tonight. The theater had been unkind. Another rejection. Another echoing silence where applause should have been. The heat hit me first, a suffocating blanket of humid air thick with the scent of something ancient and decaying. Not rot exactly, but the lingering ghost of it, a sweetness just shy of putrid. I fumbled for the light switch, a futile gesture. The room remained stubbornly dark, the only illumination filtering through a gap in the heavy burnt sienna curtains. They were the color of dried blood, a morbidly fitting aesthetic. My boots crunched on something soft underfoot. I knelt, the dust motes dancing in the faint light, and examined the floor. A cat. Or rather, the grotesque parody of one. Patches of fur, mismatched and coarse, sewn together with a clumsy, almost frantic precision. A black ear here, a striped tail there, all cobbled onto a skeletal frame that barely resembled a feline form. It was unsettling, a child's macabre creation, yet undeniably present. The fur felt strangely warm to the touch, radiating a subtle, almost imperceptible pulse. Fiffa rustle, asterisk like dry leaves skittering across stone. I ignored it, hauling my worn leather satchel onto the threadbare armchair. The wallpaper was a sickly shade of ash gray, patterned with a faded repeating motif I couldn't quite decipher. It felt heavy, the wallpaper, the room itself, as if burdened by a history I wasn't too meant to know. I pulled out the script, a tragicomedy about a forgotten god, the irony not lost on me. The words swam before my eyes, the dialogue blurring into meaningless syllables. A lullaby drifted from somewhere beyond the walls. A childish melody played backwards. It warped the familiar tune into something alien and unsettling, a twisted mockery of comfort. Hiss, hiss. Asterisk the wind, I assumed, though I hadn't noticed it before. I tried to focus on the script, forcing my attention back to the dialogue, but a prickling sensation crawled across the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched. I dismissed it. Exhaustion, that. It's all it was, the relentless pressure of failure, the crushing weight of unrealized dreams. The furniture was antique, ornate, and coated in a thick layer of dust. I opened a drawer, the wood groaning in protest, releasing a puff of stale air that smelled of mothballs and regret. The porcelain doll sat nestled amongst the linens. Its painted smile was a cruel parody of happiness, a mocking reminder of my own inadequacy. The glaze on its eyes seemed to follow me as I moved. It was a cheap thing, mass-produced, yet there was something wrong about it. I picked it up. It was cold, surprisingly heavy. The room felt smaller now, the oppressive heat intensifying. I shifted, trying to find a comfortable position, but the chair seemed to press against me, pinning me in place. The lullaby intensified, weaving its way into my thoughts, a persistent, irritating drone. I felt a strange pull, a subtle tugging sensation, as if something unseen were drawing me towards a point just beyond the periphery of my vision. I blinked, attributing it to fatigue. Then the lights flickered, plunging the room into near darkness. A collective sigh seemed to ripple through the hotel, followed by a sharp, almost painful silence, and then shimmering into existence on the walls, like condensation forming on a cold window pane, were handprints, pale, spectral, and undeniably there. Fuquelch. Asterisk a single, wet, dragging sound echoed from the hallway. The handprints. Dampness, I told myself. Old hotels, poor ventilation. The sienna curtains, thick and suffocating, trapping moisture against the walls. It was a logical explanation, a desperate grasp for normalcy in a room that felt increasingly wrong. I ran a hand over one of the prints, the wallpaper rough beneath my fingertips, the ash-gray surface clinging to the moisture. It felt cold, colder than the room's oppressive heat suggested. The lullaby, still playing, seemed to mock my attempts at reason. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Asterisk the wind, a persistent whisper against the aged window panes. My head swam for a moment, a brief disorientation that left me grasping for purchase. The room seemed to tilt, the wallpaper swirling, the handprints multiplying. It passed quickly, a fleeting tremor in my perception. I blinked, attributing it to exhaustion, the lingering effects of the theater's rejection. The cat. It sat motionless in the corner, a grotesque sculpture of mismatched fur, its eyes fixed on me with an unsettling intensity. Rustle, rustle, asterisk the sound of dry leaves, a subtle tremor in the suffocating silence. It wasn't he watching Fontiati me, I realized with a sudden chill, but two through me. I needed something to anchor me, something to ground me in reality. I rose, the chair protesting with a groan, and began to search the room. The drawers were filled with the detritus of forgotten guests, a moth, eaten sweaters, cracked toiletries, faded photographs of smiling faces. I opened a small, ornate box tucked away in the back of a drawer. Inside, nestled amongst yellowed tissue paper, was a theater program. The Lament of Lycos, it read, the title embossed in faded gold lettering, the date, 1948. The play, according to the program, was a tragedy, a celebrated hero brought low by hubris and betrayal. The reviews, clipped and formal, spoke of a disastrous opening night, a riot in the audience, and the subsequent disappearance of the lead actor. A chilling echo of my own recent experience. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth, a familiar companion. The porcelain doll, perched on the armrest, seemed to smirk. Its painted smile widened, subtly, imperceptibly. It was a trick of the light, I told myself. Fatigue, another wave of disorientation washed over me, stronger this time. The room pulsed, the shadows deepening, the lullaby intensifying. I felt a pull, a subtle tugging sensation, as if an invisible hand were drawing me towards the center of the room. I fought against it, digging my heels into the threadbare carpet, clinging to the memory of my mother's face, a lifeline in the encroaching darkness. The cat's eyes narrowed, its mismatched pupils reflecting the faint light like fractured glass. Tick, 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 asterisk a rhythmic sound, insistent and unnerving. There was no clock in the room. I stumbled back, knocking over a small table. A cascade of dust and debris rained down, momentarily obscuring the handprints. When the dust settled, the room seemed different. The air felt heavier, the shadows deeper, the lullaby more insistent. I looked at the porcelain doll. A single, black tear traced a path down its cheek, a glistening stain against the painted perfection. It wasn't tea condensation. It was something else entirely. Something viscous. Whisper, asterisk a child's voice, close to my ear, unintelligible, yet undeniably present. The viscous tear on the doll's cheek felt wrong, not merely unsettling, but fundamentally wrong. A violation of the porcelain's inherent stillness. I blinked, trying to scrub the image from my mind, but the black stain seemed to spread, a creeping darkness against the painted smile. Whisper, the child's voice again. Closer this time, a sibilant murmur just beyond the threshold of comprehension. I strained to hear it, but it dissolved into the backward lullaby, a discordant, unsettling harmony. My legs felt heavy, leaden. I swayed, grasping for the edge of the table, the dust coating my fingers like a fine powder. The room seemed to ripple, the sienna curtains blurring, the handprints on the wallpaper shifting, reforming into something else. Pale, distorted faces pressed against the gray surface, their mouths open in silent screams. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the vision away. It was exhaustion, I told myself. The rejection, the stale air, the oppressive silence. It had to be. Then, a jolt, a disorientation so profound it stole my breath. One moment I was standing in the hotel room, the next I was elsewhere. The scent of mildew and decay was replaced by the sharper tang of dust and something vaguely theatrical. I was in a hallway, long and narrow, lit by a single flickering bulb that cast elongated, dancing shadows. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet, a chorus of protest under an unseen weight. Creak, creak. The sound echoed down the corridor, amplifying the unsettling silence. I didn't remember walking here. I didn't remember fucking footy baying here. A flicker of panic tightened my chest. My memory felt fractured, like a shattered mirror reflecting distorted fragments of reality. Had I blacked out? The lullaby, faint but persistent, seemed to follow me, a spectral soundtrack to my confusion. I turned, attempting to retrace my steps, but the hallway stretched endlessly before me, a labyrinth of shadows and decay. Then I saw them. A room, its door slightly ajar, spilling an unsettling light into the hallway. I peered inside. Mannequins, hundreds of them, standing in rows, their limbs severed and meticulously arranged. A grotesque tableau of discarded artistry. The air hung thick with the scent of sawdust, and something else, something faintly metallic. The cat was there too, perched atop a stack of discarded costumes. its form more fractured than I remembered. One leg was a patchwork of different fur patterns, the tail a bizarre combination of long and short hairs. It watched me with those unsettling eyes reflecting the flickering light like shards of broken glass. I stumbled back, a wave of nausea washing over me. I recognized the room. It was the abandoned theater mentioned in the program. The Lament of Lycos. A place of tragedy, a place of disappearance. I felt a compulsion, a pull towards the mannequins, a desire to rearrange them. A voice, not my own, whispered in my mind, urging me to recreate. I fought against it, a desperate struggle against an unseen force. My hands trembled, my muscles spasmed. The fussel. Rustle. The cat's fur seemed to ripple, mirroring my internal turmoil. I found a parchment script lying on the floor, another page from the play. I picked it up, intending to examine it, but the words seemed to shift before my eyes. The carefully crafted prose rearranged itself, forming cryptic phrases. The shadow knows, the dance begins, the mirror reflects. The ink seemed to writhe on the page, a living script mocking my sanity. I dropped the parchment, recoiling from its unsettling message. Another jolt, another disorientation. The theater vanished, the mannequins dissolving into the darkness. I gasped, struggling to regain my bearings. I was lying on cold, damp stone. The scent of burnt cinnamon filled my nostrils, sharp and acrid. I sat up, disoriented, covered in dust. The hotel courtyard. The sky above was a bruised purple, the air thick with the scent of decay. I didn't remember how I got here. I didn't remember anything after the doll's tear. The lullaby was gone. Only the faint scent of burnt cinnamon remained. The courtyard felt wrong, not merely unsettling but fundamentally misplaced. The bruised purple sky pressed down, heavy and suffocating, and the scent of burnt cinnamon clung to the damp stone, a sickly sweetness that coated my tongue. I sat up, the dust clinging to my skin like a second layer. I didn't remember how I got here. I didn't remember anything after the doll's tear. The lullaby was gone, thankfully, replaced by the insistent thrumming in my ears. I needed to document this, to anchor myself to some semblance of reality before the fragments dissolved entirely. My hands trembled as I fumbled for the small notebook and pen I always carried. The pen scratched against the paper, a harsh, brittle sound in the oppressive silence. Scratch, scratch. I wrote, Hotel Courtyard. Disorientation, memory loss, cinnamon, repeat. The words felt hollow, inadequate. My gaze drifted to the far wall, where a series of portraits hung, shrouded in shadow. They were unsettling. I approached cautiously, the stones cold and slick beneath my bare feet. The portraits depicted men and women, all seemingly guests of the hotel. But their faces, they weren't clear. Blurred, indistinct, as if the artist had deliberately obscured their features. I squinted, trying to discern a single recognizable detail, but it was useless. They were all just shapes, empty vessels. The sensation of being pulled returned, a subtle tugging at the base of my skull. It wasn't painful, not exactly, but it was insistent, like an invisible hand guiding me, urging me forward. I resisted, planting my feet firmly on the ground, fighting against the unseen force. My muscles tightened, a dull ache spreading through my shoulders. The cat was there, perched on a crumbling stone gargoyle, its mismatched eyes fixed on me. The patchwork fur was even more pronounced now, the long hairs of a Siamese blended with the short, wiry coat of a feral tom, the whole thing a grotesque mockery of feline anatomy. It felt wrong, a physical manifestation of my own fractured state. As my panic grew, I noticed the cat's form becoming more disjointed, its limbs twisting at unnatural angles. Sophie rustle. The sound of its fur shifting, mirroring the turmoil within me. I remembered the theater, the mannequins, the script, the feeling of being compelled. Had I imagined it all? Was it a delusion brought on by exhaustion and the oppressive atmosphere? I shook my head, trying to clear the fog in my mind. The doll, it had to be the doll, that black tear. It felt wrong, more than unsettling, a violation. I had to understand, I had to know what that thing was. I walked slowly towards the hotel entrance, the sensation of being pulled intensifying with each step. The air grew colder, the scent of cinnamon stronger. The portraits seemed to watch me, their blurred faces shifting, reforming into something else. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the visions away. As I opened my eyes, the cat was closer now, perched on the stone steps leading to the hotel entrance. It stared directly at me, its mismatched eyes reflecting a distorted version of my own face. A face I barely recognized, a face filled with fear. The tugging sensation peaked, a sharp, visceral jolt that stole my breath. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, a sense of recognition. A single, sharp intake of breath. The pressure behind my eyes receded slightly, leaving a lingering ache. The cat remained, a patchwork monstrosity on the steps, its mismatched eyes unwavering. I took a breath, a shallow, rattling sound in the stillness. The tugging sensation hadn't vanished, merely lessened, like a tide pulling at my ankles. I had to move forward. Had to find some explanation for the everything. The hallway beyond the entrance was colder, the burnt cinnamon scent almost overpowering. The air hung thick and heavy, a palpable weight on my chest. I felt a prickling on my skin, a sensation of being watched, not by the portraits this time, but by something else. The floor was polished stone, reflecting the dim light from the hallway lamps in distorted, elongated patterns. Scrape, scrape. A faint sound, like nails on stone, echoed from somewhere ahead. My shadow, it shifted. Not the normal, predictable dance of light and dark. This was different. A subtle twitch of the hand, a slight tilt of the head. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. It was mimicking me, of course. A trick of the light. A phantom echo of my own movements. I forced myself to breathe, to rationalize. I continued down the hallway, my hand trailing along the wall, the cool stone a small comfort. The parchment script, it was in my pocket, crumpled and damp. I pulled it out, the paper whispering against itself. Foti Russell. Russell. The words I'd written earlier were still there, but beneath them new lines had appeared. Not written exactly, but pressed into the paper as if someone had used their fingertips to imprint the message. The dance of the veiled. The words swam before my eyes. I didn't recognize them. I hadn't written them. A play. Another fragment of this fractured reality. I flipped the parchment over. More words, prophecies, it seemed. Vague, unsettling pronouncements about a ritual, a sacrifice, a reawakening. Suddenly, my lips moved. Not by my volition. A voice not my own, rasped from my throat. To be or not to be, that is the question. Hamlet. I hadn't recited those lines in years. I hadn't even thought about Hamlet in years. My hands clenched, fighting against the involuntary movement. The shadow on the wall mirrored my struggle, its movements jerky and unnatural. I stumbled back, knocking against a suit of armor that stood sentinel in the hallway. Clang. The sound reverberated through the silence, making me jump. The portraits along the walls seemed to shift, their blurred faces coalescing for a fleeting moment into something almost recognizable. Faces contorted in expressions of anguish, of terror. Then a vision, a sudden, overwhelming rush of images, a stage bathed in flickering candlelight. Actors in elaborate costumes, their faces painted with grotesque masks. A play, dark and unsettling, about a ritualistic dance performed to appease some ancient unseen power. The program, which I somehow knew by heart, identified it as the Dance of the Veiled. The same words etched onto the parchment. The vision faded, leaving me gasping for breath, my head swimming. The porcelain doll. I remembered it now, sitting on a table in a room I hadn't consciously entered. Its eyes, usually vacant, were overflowing with black tears, staining the white porcelain a sickly, inky black. I could almost smell the acrid scent of the tears, a metallic tang that burned my nostrils. My shadow began to move again, independently of me. It stretched, elongated, twisting into a grotesque parody of human form. It mimicked a gesture I didn't recognize, a slow, deliberate movement of the hand, as if preparing to. To what? A shudder ran through me, a visceral wave of nausea. I tried to stop it, to regain control, but my body felt disconnected, as if I were watching myself from a distance. Then I saw it. My shadow contorted into a grotesque parody of a smile, mimicking a gesture I didn't remember making. A slow, deliberate curl of the lips revealing something else, something inhuman. A low, guttural chuckle echoed from the depths of the hallway. The guttural chuckle lingered, a vibration in the marrow of my bones. It wasn't a sound I heard so much as tufend felt twi, a pressure against my sternum. My limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. The shadow's parody of a smile widened, the distortion unsettlingly familiar. It was mimicking something, a memory perhaps, or something worse. A command. My muscles clenched, a spasm rippling through my arm. I tried to will it away, to regain control, but the effort felt monumental, like fighting against a relentless current. The backward lullaby began again, a discordant melody that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. Shh, shh, it warbled, a twisted inversion of comfort. It resonated with the pounding Sudia slow, deliberate thump, 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 thump. That seemed to emanate from the depths of the hallway, a drum, distant, but insistent. The cat, a grotesque tapestry of fur and bone, writhed on the floor, its mismatched eyes glowing with an unnatural light. A rasping hiss escaped its throat, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It mirrored my internal turmoil, a physical manifestation of the dread consuming me. The parchment in my hand trembled, the words the dance of the veiled blurring into an illegible smear. Then the spasms intensified. My legs moved, stiff and jerky, propelling me forward against my will. My arms raised, mimicking a gesture I didn't recognize, a slow, deliberate arc, as if conducting an orchestra of unseen horrors. I fought it, straining against the invisible force, but it was like trying to hold back a landslide. My body was no longer my own. I saw them then. Mannequins, rows and rows of them, frozen in grotesque poses, their painted eyes staring blankly ahead. They were in a room I hadn't consciously entered, yet here I was, surrounded by their silent mockery. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decay, a cloying sweetness that made my stomach churn. The burnt cinnamon scent was gone, replaced by something far more sinister. The shadow, now a fluid, almost sentient entity, began to guide my movements. It was orchestrating a performance, using me as its puppet. My arms extended, my legs bent, contorting me into a series of unnatural poses. I felt a searing pain in my muscles, a protest against the forced contortions. Crack. Pop. The sounds echoed in the oppressive silence. I caught a glimpse of something in the periphery. A tall, faceless figure shrouded in shadow observing the performance. It was an absence, a void where features should be. I couldn't discern any details, only a sense of immense, overwhelming power. A cold dread washed over me, paralyzing me with fear. It felt familiar, as if I'd seen it before in a dream or a forgotten memory. The lullabies swelled, drowning out the pounding of the drum. Shh. Shh. It whispered, a siren song luring me deeper into the abyss. The cat's hissing intensified. A frantic, desperate plea. I tried to scream, to break free from the invisible bonds, but no sound escaped my lips. My vocal cords felt constricted, paralyzed. Then the shadow exerted its full force. My body lurched forward, my arms extended, my legs locked into a specific pose. A posture of supplication, of surrender. I felt a sharp, agonizing pain in my spine as it forced me into the position, holding me there against my will. My muscles screamed in protest, but I couldn't move. I was a prisoner in my own body, a puppet dancing to an unseen conductor's tune. The burnt sienna and ash gray of the room seemed to press in on me, suffocating me. A whisper, cold and devoid of emotion, slithered into my mind. A single word spoken with an unsettling clarity. Begin. The word resonated, a physical blow. Begin, my spine protested. A grinding, footy crack that echoed in the suffocating silence. The sienna stone of the walls seemed to pulse, a slow, rhythmic throb beneath my skin. It wasn't a visual phenomenon, not precisely. More like a vibration, a sympathetic resonance that made my teeth ache. My heartbeat hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo against the oppressive stillness. Thump, 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 thump. It was the only sound I could truly claim as my own. The mannequins. They hadn't moved, of course, frozen in their grotesque tableau, their painted eyes reflecting the sickly pulsing light. But the room had shifted. The edges blurred, the boundaries between reality and nightmare dissolving like sugar in water. The air, thick with the scent of decay, pressed against my lungs, stealing my breath. I tried to remember how I'd arrived here, but the memory was a fractured mosaic, shards of images and sensations that refused to coalesce into a coherent narrative. A stage, applause. A woman's laughter gone, replaced by this performance. My arms moved. Not timid, my arms, not truly. They belonged to the shadow now, extensions of its will. The involuntary arc, the deliberate bend to each movement was a betrayal. A searing pain lanced through my shoulder, a protest against the unnatural contortion. I tasted blood, a metallic tang on my tongue, but couldn't discern where it came from. The porcelain doll, perched precariously on a nearby pedestal, seemed to watch with vacant, black eyes. I recalled a memory, or perhaps a dream 4D. The feel of cold porcelain against my fingertips, the unsettling weight of it in my hand. The lullaby returned, amplified now, a distorted chorus that seemed to emanate from the very stones of the room. Shh, 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 shh. It whispered, a perverse comfort. I fought against the compulsion, against the shadow's control, but it was like wrestling with a phantom limb. My body was a vessel, an instrument played by an unseen hand. The cat, where was it? The grotesque tapestry of fur and bone had vanished, leaving only the lingering scent of something feral and unsettling. Its absence felt significant, a missing piece in a puzzle I couldn't begin to comprehend. The faceless figure remained, a looming presence in the periphery. It hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, just observed, a void where a face should be, radiating an aura of immense, overwhelming power. A familiar power. It tugged at the edges of my memory, a half-forgotten dream, a suppressed fear. The sienna stone pulsed faster, the burnt cinnamon scent, long gone, briefly resurfaced. A phantom memory of a life I couldn't quite grasp. Was I an actor, or something else entirely? The shadow tightened its grip, forcing me into a new sequence of movements. A slow, deliberate rotation, a measured step forward. Scrape. Scrape. The sound of my shoes against the stone floor, amplified in the oppressive silence. The mannequins seemed to lean in, their painted eyes following my every move. My own reflection, distorted in a polished surface I hadn't noticed before, revealed a stranger, a puppet, a hollow shell, the lullaby intensified, drowning out the frantic hammering of my heart. Shh. Shush. It crooned, a siren song luring me deeper into the abyss. A fragment of a memory surfaced 30 vertige. A stage, a spotlight, the expectant hush of an audience. But the memory was tainted, corrupted by the shadow's influence. It was not my memory. It was Fidite memory. A twisted echo of a life I had never lived. I tried to scream, to break free, but my voice was trapped, a silent prisoner in my throat. The pain in my spine intensified, a searing agony that threatened to overwhelm me. Pop. A sickening sound that resonated deep within my bones. The shadow's control was absolute now. My limbs moved with a chilling precision, executing the ritualistic dance with a grace I did not possess. I was no longer Rhys Holloway. I was a vessel, a puppet, an instrument of an unknown purpose. The faceless figure shifted slightly, a subtle movement that sent a shiver down my spine. It was pleased. Then the shadow detached itself, separating from my form, coalescing into a distinct entity. It stood before me, a dark silhouette against the pulsing sienna stone, and it smiled. A mockery of a smile, twisting its features into a grotesque parody of human expression. The echo of the chuckle resonated, a vibration in the marrow of my bones. Single, echoing footstep. The lobby, that's what it was. A vast, echoing emptiness that swallowed sound and spat out disorientation. My head swam, a relentless tide of nausea threatening to pull me under. The sienna pulse was gone, the oppressive weight lifted, but replaced by a hollowness that felt far more insidious. I lay on something cold and hard-finned marble, I realized as I pushed myself up, the movement sending a fresh wave of dizziness through me. The air hung thick and stagnant, heavy with the scent of dust and something else. Something acrid, like burnt sugar and decay. Fu drip, drip, drip. The sound echoed from somewhere unseen, each drop a tiny hammer blow against the silence. I scanned the room, my vision blurry. The grand architecture of the hotel reduced to a distorted panorama. Crystal chandeliers draped in cobwebs hung like skeletal remains. Portraits of stern-faced men, their eyes shadowed and unreadable, lined the walls. My limbs felt heavy, disconnected. I tried to recall how I'd arrived here, but the memory was a blank slate, wiped clean. A stage, a woman's laughter. The porcelain doll, yes, the doll. I looked down. It lay on the marble floor, a shattered mosaic of white porcelain and black tears. The blackness was viscous, clinging to the stone like spilled ink. I knelt, the cold seeping through my trousers, and examined the fragments. Each piece seemed to whisper a silent accusation. A tremor ran through me, a phantom echo of the ritual. I felt violated, as if something had burrowed into my mind, rearranged my thoughts, stolen a piece of my soul. The parchment script, the one that had dictated my movements, was gone. In its place, scrawled across the marble in what looked like charcoal, was a single word: witness. Witness what? To what? The question clawed at my throat, a silent scream trapped within. I stood, my legs shaky, and stumbled towards a polished surface, a massive mirror that stretched the length of one wall. I needed to see myself, to confirm that I was still me. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't quite right. The eyes were the same footy, the same weary disappointment, the same flicker of something lost. But the mouth, the curve of the lips was subtly different, the jawline sharper, more defined. It was a distortion, a trick of the light, I told myself. But the unease lingered, a cold knot in my stomach. Drip, drip, drip. The water seemed to be closer now, the sound amplified, pressing against my eardrums. I saw a fleeting movement in the periphery, a tall, dark shape just beyond the edge of my vision. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs, but there was nothing there. Just the echoing emptiness of the lobby, the portraits of stern-faced men, the oppressive silence. It was a trick of the light, a phantom born of exhaustion and fear. I had to get out of here. Each step felt leaden, as if I were wading through treacle. The air grew colder, the scent of decay more pronounced. I caught a glimpse of myself again in a smaller, ornate mirror near the exit. The face staring back was subtly altered. The eyes were colder, the mouth set in a faint, unsettling smile. The skin seemed stretched, taut over the bone. It wasn't my face, not entirely. The metallic tang of blood filled my nostrils. I touched my lip, my fingers coming away stained crimson. Where had it come from? The memory remained elusive, shrouded in a fog of disorientation and dread. Drip, drip, drip. The sound was everywhere now, a relentless pulse in the silence. Then, a sound cut through the dripping water, a sound that froze me to the spot. A child's laughter, high-pitched, distorted, and utterly devoid of joy. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. A sound that resonated deep within my bones, a sound that confirmed my deepest, most terrifying fear. I was no longer Rhys Holloway. I was something else, something other. A child's laughter, abruptly cut off. The urge to flee was a physical ache, a relentless pressure behind my ribs. I pushed past the ornate mirror, the unsettling smile of the distorted reflection fading as I moved. The metallic taste on my tongue lingered, a phantom reminder of something I couldn't place. Drip, drip, drip. The sound followed me, a mocking echo of my desperation. Each footfall on the marble felt heavy, deliberate, as if something were holding me back. I stumbled through a series of corridors, each identical to the last, the grand architecture becoming a labyrinth of oppressive grandeur. The air thickened, the scent of decay intensifying, mingling with a new sickly sweetness, rotting lilies perhaps. The swarm began. A low, insistent buzzing, just beyond the periphery of my hearing, like 1,000 tiny wings vibrating in unison. It prickled my skin, raised gooseflesh on my arms. I quickened my pace, the buzzing growing louder, more insistent. My legs burned, my lungs ached, but the corridors stretched endlessly before me. I had to get out. I needed to get out. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I leaned against a wall, the cold marble a brief respite from the sweltering humidity. The buzzing intensified, coalescing into a palpable pressure against my temples. It felt directed. Then, as abruptly as it began, the corridor ended. Not in a doorway, not in another lobby, but in a solid wall. A dead end, panic clawed at my throat. I pounded on the wall, a futile gesture against the impenetrable stone. The buzzing escalated, a frantic, chaotic symphony. Drip, drip, drip. The water seemed to be mocking my efforts. A section of the wall shimmered, then dissolved, revealing a hidden chamber. It wasn't a room, but a repository, an archive. Rows upon rows of shelves lined the walls, crammed with dusty tomes, faded documents, and brittle photographs. The air here was different, stale but dry, lacking the cloying sweetness of decay. The buzzing subsided, replaced by the gentle rustling of parchment. I moved deeper into the archive, drawn by an unseen force. The documents were meticulously organized, each labeled with dates and names. I scanned the titles, my fingers tracing the faded ink: guest manifest, incident reports, containment protocols. The language was archaic, formal, but the content was chillingly clear. A pattern emerged, a recurring cycle of guests arriving at the hotel, exhibiting signs of distress, and ultimately disappearing. The entity. It wasn't just possessing them, it was to be consuming them, absorbing their memories, their potential. A photograph slipped from a loose page, a woman, her face blurred, her eyes wide with terror. Another, and another, each one a ghostly echo of my own impending fate. The sensation of being pulled intensified, a subtle tugging at the base of my skull, drawing me deeper into the archive, deeper into the entity's grasp. It wasn't just a feeling anymore, it was a physical force. I stumbled upon a file labeled Subject, Holloway. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened it, my hands trembling. The pages detailed my arrival at the hotel, my interactions with the staff, my descent into. This But there was something else, a series of projections, timelines branching out from my present, each depicting a different outcome, a different life. The entity wasn't just inhabiting me, it was weaving my memories, my potential futures, into a distorted tapestry of its own creation. The inevitability pressed down on me, a crushing weight. I wanted to fight, to resist, but my limbs felt heavy, disconnected. The buzzing returned, a low hum vibrating through the floorboards. I turned, drawn to a single photograph tucked into the back of the file. It was a picture of me, years ago, younger, less broken, but the eyes were wrong. They held a chilling familiarity, a spark of something alien, something predatory. A slow, unsettling smile curved my lips, a smile I didn't recognize. A single, resonant chime echoed through the archive, silencing the rustling parchment and the buzzing swarm. A single, resonant chime. The photograph stared back, a mocking imitation of a life I no longer recognized. The smile, it wasn't mine. It was a grotesque parody stretched thin across a face that felt borrowed. A tremor ran through me, not of fear, but of a detached, clinical observation. Interesting. The entity was refining its mimicry. The parchment rustling intensified, a dry whisper against the oppressive silence. It wasn't the sound of paper, precisely. It was the sound of something folding, like a map being drawn across the very fabric of my being. The chime, that single, resonant note, lingered in the air, vibrating in my teeth. Then, a new sound, a scraping, a subtle shift in the shadows. I turned. My shadow, it wasn't simply Twide Castide upon the floor. It stood, detached, a dark silhouette mimicking my movements with a disconcerting lag. It tilted its head, a slow, deliberate gesture that mirrored my own, but with a mocking quality. A ripple of irritation passed through me. This was inconvenient. Amusing, isn't it? The voice wasn't mine. It emanated from the shadow, a distorted echo of my own tone, laced with a chilling amusement. It wasn't speaking with sound exactly. It was projecting. A thought, formed into words, pressed directly against my mind. The entity, it was using my shadow as a conduit. A puppet show, with me as the unwitting marionette. I tried to move, to recoil, but my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. The sensation of being pulled intensified, a relentless tugging at my core, drawing me towards the shadow, towards it. A glimpse. A fleeting impression of something vast, something towering over the archive. A shape impossibly tall, faceless, a void given form. It was so immense, so utterly devoid of detail, that it felt like staring into the absence of reality itself. The backward lullaby began, a discordant, unsettling melody, rising in intensity, weaving its way into my thoughts, blurring the edges of my perception. Hush, little darling, don't you cry. The words twisted in my mind, a mockery of comfort. It wasn't a song, it was a command. I saw the faces again, the blurred images from the photographs, flashing before my eyes. Each one a victim, each one consumed, each one reduced to a hollow shell. The woman with the terror-stricken eyes. The man with the vacant stare, they were all puppets, just like me. The realization wasn't accompanied by panic, but by a cold, detached acceptance. The odds were, as always, unfavorable. The shadow took a step closer. The performance is about to begin, Rhys, it intoned, the voice a chilling echo in my mind. You have a role to play. My hand rose, not of my own volition. It reached out towards a dusty tome on a nearby shelf. My fingers traced the title, The Grand Masquerade. The pages turned themselves, revealing intricate diagrams, musical notations, and cryptic instructions. A script. I was being given a script. The lullaby swelled, a suffocating wave of sound, pressing down on me, stealing my breath. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching myself from a distance, observing a tragic, inevitable play unfold. The burnt sienna light of the archive seemed to darken, the ash-gray shadows deepening, coalescing around me, enveloping me. I opened my mouth, and the words came, not from my own will, but from the entity's control. The words were precise, measured, devoid of emotion. Greetings, esteemed guests. Welcome to the Grand Masquerade. The camera focused on my eyes, the ash-gray light reflected within them. A flicker of something alien, something predatory, replacing the remnants of Rhys Holloway. A single, chilling word whispered directly into the listener's ear. Next.